Tonight, the Obamacare sign-up falls short by 80%. Insurance purchases stumble, but poor Americans do find hope in Medicaid. Major Garrett and Nancy Cordes have a first look at Obamacare's impact. Rescue workers hammer through to the hungry and homeless after the super typhoon. Seth Doan is in the middle of it. Airport security screening that cost nearly $1 billion may be a failure. Bob Orr has the government investigation. And in prison for years for a murder he didn't commit, Ryan Ferguson is free.
First thing I did was just hug my parents and kiss my girlfriend.
Aaron Moriarty of 48 Hours has the remarkable story.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. There hasn't been so much anticipation about a number since a record jackpot was at stake in Powerball. Today, 6 weeks after the troubled opening of the federal health insurance website, the Obama administration finally told us how many Americans have signed up. In the first month, it comes to just over 106,000. People who chose policies on both the federal and state sites, though they had not necessarily paid for them yet. That is only about 20% of the 494,000 that the administration had projected. Major Garrett is at the White House for us tonight. Major?
Scott, the White House said for weeks these enrollment numbers would fall short of expectations, and they have. The poorly designed federal health care website, nearly unusable in its first days of operation, severely limited the number of people who were able to sign up for coverage. Of the 106,000 Americans who are counted as enrolled in Obamacare, less than a third, just under 27,000, did so by navigating healthcare.gov. The remaining three-quarters, just under 80,000, signed up on one of the health insurance exchanges run by 14 states and the District of Columbia. More disturbing for the administration, the ratio of Obamacare customers is currently heavily tilted toward those receiving insurance entirely funded by the government. Nearly 400,000 Americans qualified for Medicaid or Children's Health Insurance Program coverage, 4 times the number who have signed up for private insurance. There is high interest in the health care plans. Nearly 27 million people have visited the federal and state websites, and just over 3 million have called for information or help signing up. These disappointing enrollment numbers are not the only problem for the White House. Senate and House Democrats are increasingly frustrated the president has yet to produce a fix for those who saw their individual insurance policies canceled and can't afford the new ones. Senate Democrats, Scott, have summoned the White House Chief of Staff to Capitol Hill tomorrow to air their grievances.
Thank you, Major. Now we want to show you the 14 states plus the District of Columbia that set up their own health insurance websites instead of relying on the federal system. We found out today that nearly half of the people who have signed up for private insurance plans in these states are Californians. Ben Tracy is in our Los Angeles newsroom. Ben?
Scott, there are more than 5.5 million people in California that are uninsured. It's the largest uninsured population in the country, so it was always expected that California would enroll the most people in Obamacare. California was also the first state to set up a health care exchange and got hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding to build a system that is now known as Covered California. Now, the goal here in the Golden State is to enroll up to 700,000 people in private health plans by April 1st. So far, 35,000 people have signed up, so at the current pace, it would take more than a year and a half to reach that goal. However, today, the head of Covered California did say that those enrollments are picking up. He said since November 1st, 2,000 people a day are signing up. And Scott, that is double the pace of October.
Ben, thanks very much. Now back to the technical problems with healthcare.gov. Some of the administration's top computer experts appeared today before a House committee that was demanding to know what went wrong. Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill for us tonight. Nancy?
Scott, these are the managers who have really been on the front lines of creating and now fixing healthcare.gov. In fact, one even testified that he slept on his office floor the week that the site launched. But none of them were really able to explain why this product they worked on for years was so flawed.
Do you solemnly swear?
Under oath, some of the administration's top technology officers testified they were caught off guard by the website's poor performance, even though they knew well in advance that some key components weren't working, like a feature that allowed users to comparison shop for insurance plans without creating an account.
It failed so miserably that we could not consciously let people use it.
Henry Chow is the manager at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid who was most involved in developing the website. He came in for the most criticism from Republicans, like Tennessee's Scott Desjardins.
Knowing what you know now, would you have pushed harder to move the date back?
I go by what I said.
So you would let history repeat itself? It's been a rocky, Mr. Park. Would you have?
That is not what I said.
Utah Republican Jason Chaffetz had questions for Chow about the site's security.
Mr. Chow, would you put all your personal information about you and your loved ones in it?
Yes, in fact, I've recommended my sister, who is unemployed right now, to actually.
Did she successfully register, sign up?
I haven't talked to her lately.
He said the site can now accommodate about 20 to 25,000 users at one time. A big improvement from the first week, but still far short of the original goal of 50 to 60,000.
I'm part of an all-hands-on-deck effort that's been mobilized across the administration.
Todd Park is the chief technology officer for the White House. He's now working full-time on fixing the website. South Carolina Republican Trey Gowdy wanted a timeline.
When will it be operational to your satisfaction?
Well, we have a goal that the team is pursuing with tremendous intensity.
How many more weeks? I'm looking for a number.
That's working hard to have the site functioning by the end of this month.
That carefully crafted answer, which was repeated more than once, led some lawmakers to believe that the administration's confidence that it can really get all these bugs fixed by November 30th may be slipping, Scott.
Nancy, thank you. Now we want to take you back to the Philippines, where a humanitarian crisis is unfolding in the town of Tacloban, the city that's been hardest hit by Typhoon Haiyan. Tonight, bodies are in the streets. Debris has blocked many roads, making it next to impossible to distribute food and water to the survivors. Thousands have jammed the airport looking for a way out. These children said that they fled their home after armed gangs were seen terrorizing their neighborhood. Seth Doan is in Tacloban.
From the air, the pleas for help were easy to see. On the ground, there was a growing sense of panic. The UN estimates that Typhoon has left more than 500,000 Filipinos hungry, homeless, and thirsty. Tacloban's mayor urged residents to flee if they could. Thousands jammed the ruined airport, hoping to get one of the few seats out on military planes. Most are still waiting. More than a dozen coastal communities are still cut off. There's a shortage of transportation and fuel, and roads are clogged with debris. Around the city, volunteers prepared to bury more bodies as the death toll rose above 2,300.
People are dying here. Too many people are dying just for that storm.
Jaime Fernandez lost almost everything in his home. There's very little left for him and his family to live on.
We can't get any food or buy any food from other stores because there's no stores to buy on.
There were many more Philippine security forces on the streets of Tacloban today, but the government has been criticized for being slow to respond. 8 died today after a wall collapsed as survivors mobbed a food warehouse.
It's more like a civil war here.
But help is starting to arrive. U.S. military flights are now operating from Cebu Airport. Food is starting to be distributed, but the shortage of clean water is still an acute problem. These survivors tapped into an underground water pipe. We don't know if it's safe, this man said. We need to boil it, but at least we have something.
Seth Doan is joining us from Tacloban. Seth, what about medical care?
Well, Scott, we were in a government-run hospital visiting them there, and they said that they were really struggling to deal with the patients they had. We saw people with relatively simple injuries that had become life-threatening because they didn't have the blood supply, they didn't have the power to take care of that, and they couldn't airlift patients out. They are operating on generator power now, but told us after the typhoon they were stitching wounds by candlelight. And one of the biggest problems is no food, and this is at a government-run hospital.
Seth Doan in Tacloban for us tonight. Seth, thank you. Filipino Americans have organized their own relief operations. We're going to take a look at one of the largest in California later in the broadcast. Today, 4 U.S. Marines were killed at Camp Pendleton in California. They were clearing unexploded ordnance from an artillery range when something went wrong. None of the Marines has been identified. The accident is under investigation. Today, we saw a government audit that says that nearly $1 billion has been poured into a transportation security program that may not be making Americans any safer. And we asked Bob Orr to look into that.
At Washington's Union Station, we watched these two men with backpacks as they watched everyone else. They are undercover behavior detection officers, trained to pick out bad guys by looking for expressions of fear, anxiety, or deception. Since 2007, the Transportation Security Administration has spent $900 million training and deploying 3,000 behavior detection officers. Those so-called BDOs are now stationed at major transit hubs, primarily in 176 of the nation's busiest airports. But a new report from the Government Accountability Office questions whether BDOs are effective, concluding available evidence does not support whether behavioral indicators can be used to identify persons who may pose a risk to aviation security. The TSA argues the BDOs provide a critical layer of defense by looking for signals which can't be picked up by metal detectors or explosive scanners. In a statement, the TSA said looking for suspicious behavior is a common sense approach, and when combined with other security layers, helps mitigate a variety of threats. A 2011 Homeland Security analysis found the BDOs to be highly effective, identifying high-risk passengers far more often than random screening. But the GAO rejected that Homeland study, saying the findings were based on bad science. And the GAO questions the whole premise of behavior-based detection, concluding it is the same or slightly better than chance. The GAO, with some support in Congress, now is calling on Homeland Security to cut the funding for behavioral programs until they can be proven effective. But the TSA, Scott, is promising to fight to keep those BDOs at their posts.
Bob Orr in our Washington newsroom. Thank you, Bob. Another government agency made big news today about America's push for energy independence. The Energy Department said the United States got more oil out of the ground last month than it imported from overseas. It's the first time that's happened since 1995. On Wall Street, stock prices hit new highs after Macy's predicted a good holiday season for retailers. The Dow gained 70 points to close at 15,821. That is the 36th record close this year. The S&P 500 was up 14 points, putting it at an all-time high of 1,782. A man wrongly convicted of murder is free tonight, and a massive iceberg could threaten ships when the CBS Evening News continues. We have an update on a story that 48 Hours correspondent Aaron Moriarty has been following a long time about a man named Ryan Ferguson. He spent nearly a decade in a Missouri prison for a murder that he's always insisted he did not commit. Well, tonight, Ferguson, now 29 years old, is a free man thanks in no small part to Aaron's relentless investigation of this case. And Aaron is with us tonight. Aaron?
Well, Scott, his release actually came as a surprise. A special prosecutor in the case was just appointed last Friday, so no one expected that just 4 days later, it would all be over.
First thing I did was just hug my parents and kiss my girlfriend.
He's been out of prison for just 24 hours, but Ryan Ferguson is already savoring the taste of his newfound freedom. Before supporters and the press last night, He spoke about the time and effort it took to get to this day.
To get arrested and to get charged for a crime you didn't commit, it's incredibly easy. But to get out of prison, it takes an army.
Ferguson's release followed a nearly decade-long campaign led by his father, Bill, to clear his son's name.
I've driven 9,000 miles in 21 days.
A Facebook page designed to draw attention to the case has attracted supporters from all over the world.
It's been amazing seeing the support.
Guilty of murder in the second degree.
Ferguson was convicted in 2005 of the murder of Kent Heithold, a Columbia, Missouri newspaper sports editor. There was plenty of physical evidence found at the scene, but none of it matched Ferguson. There were 2 witnesses against him, a high school friend who claimed he helped Ferguson commit the late-night robbery and murder. The other, a janitor who said he saw Ferguson at the crime scene. Both men later recanted and said they lied at his trial. Still, despite the lack of evidence, Ferguson's attorney, Kathleen Zellner, says he was running out of appeals.
We were at the last stage, the very last stage, and if you cannot get the conviction vacated at that stage, you're at the end of the road.
Last week, a Missouri appellate court found that prosecutors had concealed evidence from Ferguson's defense, denying him a fair trial. His conviction was thrown out, and late yesterday, the Missouri Attorney General announced he would not retry him.
It's better than, I would think, winning the Super Bowl. You know, we saved a life.
The Attorney General actually stated that he would not retry Ferguson at this time, which leaves open the possibility that he could bring charges later, but the evidence that exists today points to individuals other than Ferguson.
Aaron, you became interested in this 8 years ago. Why did this catch your attention?
We had actually seen the police video of the main accuser, and at that time, this young man, Charles Erickson, seemed to know few details, if any, of the crime. But then at the trial, he became the star witness, and that was a troubling discrepancy.
Aaron, thanks very much. In Virginia today, a jury found Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Krasinski not guilty of groping a woman outside a bar. Krasinski's arrest in May helped fuel an uproar over sexual abuse in the military because at the time he led the Air Force's sexual assault response team. During the trial, Krasinski's lawyers pointed out several inconsistencies in his accuser's story. Krasinski found not guilty today. No gem has ever sold for as much as this pink diamond. How much? That's next. An American Airlines jet made an emergency landing last night after the windshield cracked. You can see it there on the left-hand side. The crack was discovered after Flight 160 took off from Miami for Boston. The 757 landed safely in Orlando. Britain has hired a team of researchers to track an iceberg that is bigger than the city of Chicago, 270 square miles. The iceberg broke off from a glacier in Antarctica and could threaten shipping. A satellite photo sequence shows a rift that formed 2 years ago and kept getting bigger until the berg broke free in July. A record was broken last night in an art auction in New York. This painting, 3 Studies of Lucian Freud by Francis Bacon, became the most expensive work of art ever sold at auction, $142 million. That is $22.5 million more than the previous record holder, this version of Edvard Munch's The Scream, which sold last year. And today, this diamond went for a record price. The flawless pink star, weighing nearly 60 carats, sold at auction in Geneva, $83 million. They are separated by an ocean, but Filipino Americans are reaching out to help their loved ones. That story is next. Earlier, we showed you the thousands of Filipinos cut off from the world by the super typhoon. Well, Southern California is home to the largest community of Filipinos outside the Philippines, more than 300,000. 300,000 waiting for word. Here's Bill Whitaker.
I cannot barely hear you. Hello?
For Los Angeles shopkeeper Virgie Lyons, her phone is a blessing and a curse. A blessing because it's provided the only contact with her family in Tacloban, a brief call from her brother Saturday before his battery died. A curse because she hasn't heard from him or anyone else since.
What did he say?
He said, "We're okay, don't worry." He's like screaming. "Tell them that we're okay." After that, we got cut off.
Her sister in Manila heard that 2 young nieces survived the typhoon but died yesterday. Whether from dehydration, hunger, or injuries, they don't know.
What is it like for you, this not knowing?
I really, really hurt. I want to know now if they're okay. There's nothing I can do, just pray.
California's Filipino community is praying and mounting a relief effort. Nurses are sending medical supplies. Neighbors are chipping in too. The Bay Area organization Stop Hunger Now is shipping 285,000 meals. In LA, a Red Cross telethon raised more than $100,000 for relief aid. Virgie Lyons was comforted by one thing her brother said in his brief call. He and his family survived huddling in the sturdy house she had built for them with money she had earned in the U.S. Still, the TV images are painful.
Really, it's like a nightmare.
Not hearing, not knowing is unbearable.
Hello, hello, hello.
Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Los Angeles.
More aid arriving in the Philippines every hour. That's the CBS Evening News for tonight. For all of us at CBS News all around the world, good night.